Welcome to Life Stories, where sometimes the people you call family become the ones who break you the deepest. Imagine surviving a devastating accident, waking up unable to walk, only to discover your parents chose a luxury vacation over your recovery. Not a phone call, not a visit, just silence, and a single message: don't call us while we're happy. This isn't just a story about physical healing. It's about betrayal dressed as love, strength found in unexpected places, and what happens when the people you trust the most walk away. If you've ever been abandoned, overlooked, or told you were too strong to need help, this story will stay with you long after the screen fades to black. Because sometimes the real comeback doesn't start in a hospital bed. It begins the moment you decide you deserve better. Let's begin. They say rock bottom has a basement. I didn't know what that meant until the night my parents left me, legs shattered, spirit splintered, while boarding a flight to Paris with my younger sister. They told me not to call while they were finally happy, and I listened. Not out of respect, but because I had no voice left to scream. My name is Madison Carter, and at 29, I had curated the perfect life. Senior marketing director at a top Seattle firm, corner office with a skyline view, gym routine at 6, coffee at 7:15, and strategy decks that got standing ovations in boardrooms. I had built everything myself, brick by brick, because I learned early on that applause was the only language my family understood, and only if you earned it loudly. My parents, Susan and Daniel Carter, preferred Brooke. Always had. She was the spontaneous one. Read, impulsive. Switched majors 3 times, called me from Coachella crying about a lost charger, and still graduated college with champagne and applause. They paid for every class she failed and retook. Me? I funded my way through scholarships and side jobs while eating cereal for dinner. My reward? A graduation card and a polite, "We're proud of you, Maddie." Still, I clung to the myth that blood means loyalty. So when we planned a family trip to Paris, a celebration of my promotion and Brooke's graduation, I thought maybe finally we'd exist on the same emotional page. For a moment, we did. At dinner, Dad opened a $200 Bordeaux. Mom made lasagna from scratch. Brooke laughed with wine-drunk joy, and I talked about a campaign I'd be presenting to a European client. No one interrupted. No one dismissed. It felt real. The crash came 12 hours later. I was driving home through a late April storm, the kind where Seattle's sky forgets how to breathe. A deer darted across I-90. I swerved, hydroplaned. My car slammed into the guardrail and a pickup truck didn't stop in time. Metal screamed. My world flipped, and when it stopped, I couldn't move my legs, couldn't feel them. When I woke up in the ICU, tubes down my throat, I searched the room for my parents. They weren't there. A nurse told me they'd been notified. That was day 1. They arrived on day 3. Their first words weren't, "Are you okay?" It was, "We're trying to decide whether to postpone the Paris trip. It's non-refundable." I stared at them, high on morphine and heartbreak, and whispered, "I can't walk." My mom smiled tightly. "But you will, darling. You've always been strong." Dad nodded. "This won't define you." And Brooke? Her eyes welled with tears, but she said nothing. They stayed for 45 minutes. Left behind a half-eaten fruit basket and a voicemail from a travel agent. The discharge plan was brutal, rods in both femurs, nerve damage, a 3-month recovery minimum. A social worker asked about my support system. I said, "My family," like it was still true. The next morning, they sat at the foot of my hospital bed and told me they'd be going to Paris anyway. "We need this," my mom said. "Don't guilt us for prioritizing our happiness." I asked them one last time to stay a few days, just until I could navigate the apartment. My dad patted my shoulder like I was a colleague grieving a failed project. "You'll figure it out. You always do." They left me a folding walker, a mini fridge stocked with frozen meals, and their love wrapped in silence and abandonment. The first night alone, I crawled on my elbows to the bathroom, nearly passed out from the pain, and sobbed until I lost my voice. I tried to call Brooke. It rang once, then went to voicemail. 2 days later, she sent a selfie from the Eiffel Tower. The caption read, "Best family trip ever." 3 weeks passed. My incision site was inflamed. I hadn't showered properly. I had learned to use tongues to grab dropped items. The smell of rot clung to the corners of my apartment like guilt that wouldn't leave. I stopped answering calls, my work inbox filled with gentle nudges that grew more urgent. My body was failing, my finances were bleeding, and my will, my famous Carter grit, was drying up. Then came the knock. I almost didn't answer it, but the voice, soft, persistent, broke through. "Maddie, it's Jordan, from work." I opened the door in a stained hoodie, my hair matted, breath sour. Jordan Reynolds, the quiet account manager from the West Wing, stood with a canvas tote bag and a look that said, "I see you." Not, "I pity you." Not, "What a shame." Just, "I see you." "I brought eggs and ginger tea. Do you mind if I come in?" I said nothing, just wheeled back and let her cross the threshold. Within an hour, the sink was empty, the floors swept, and my meds finally sorted. She didn't ask what happened. She asked, "Who's showing up for you?" And when I said, "No one," her jaw clenched like someone who had once been left behind and promised herself she wouldn't become that kind of person. Before leaving, Jordan made a call. I heard her say my name. Then severe post-op isolation. Then no support system. That call would ripple out into a lifeline I hadn't known I needed. The next morning, 3 more people showed up. My supervisor, Monica, with her partner, Alex, a nurse, and Chris from accounting, who brought a folder labeled Emergency Budget Options. They didn't come to fix me. They came to carry pieces of me I couldn't lift alone. But the real twist didn't come until 2 weeks later, when I opened a padded envelope from a Seattle address I didn't recognize. Inside was a letter, handwritten, signed Diane Carter, my mother's estranged sister, the woman I was told never to contact. "I heard about your accident from someone at your office," it began. "Your mother didn't mention it. I'm not surprised. Have you ever realized your family was more dangerous than the silence they left behind? Do you believe love means loyalty or presence when it matters most?" Because what Aunt Diane revealed next changed everything I thought I knew about why they left. The letter from Aunt Diane sat in my lap, soft as paper but heavy as lead. Her handwriting was elegant, sharp like someone who had written hard truths before. "Your mother left more than one person behind in her lifetime. You're not the first. But maybe, if you let me, I can help make sure you're the last." That sentence rewrote everything. It reframed my family not as people who had failed me once, but as people who had always failed in the moments that mattered. Diane had been cut off after standing up to my mother years ago when their father, my grandfather, was dying. While Diane juggled hospice visits and hospital bills, my mom had flown to Bali. She said she couldn't handle toxic energy, Diane wrote, so she took a yoga retreat instead. My stomach turned reading it. Not because I was surprised, but because I wasn't. For days I didn't respond. I folded the letter neatly and slipped it into a drawer I couldn't reach without help. It was easier to pretend I hadn't read it than to sit with what it revealed. The people I had spent my entire life trying to please were incapable of giving what I needed most. Not just now. Always. Jordan continued showing up every other day, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with silence. We didn't talk much about my family. She never pushed. But she was there the night I tried to stand on my own and collapsed sideways, tears mixing with frustration and shame as I shouted at the floor, "This isn't strength. This is pathetic." Jordan knelt next to me, not to lift me, but to meet me eye level. "No," she said quietly, "strength is asking for help when all you've ever known is doing it alone." It should have been enough. It was more than enough. But old wounds ache even when they're bandaged. I still checked my parents' social media out of habit, and when I did, the betrayal twisted deeper. Photos of them clinking champagne glasses on a rooftop terrace. Brooke posing in a silk dress with the Eiffel Tower glowing behind her. Captions like, "Self-care isn't selfish." Not a single word about me, not even a vague thinking of home. That weekend, Jordan convinced me to join a virtual support group for trauma recovery. I didn't speak during the first session, just listened. A woman named Marissa talked about waking up from a coma and realizing her husband had moved out. A teenage boy named Trey confessed he hadn't spoken since the accident that took his brother. The group wasn't shiny or pretty or even hopeful, but it was real. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a fluke of abandonment. I felt like one chapter in a book filled with survival. The next day, I finally texted Diane. I thanked her, told her I remembered meeting her when I was 8, how she'd given me a music box shaped like a carousel, how my mom made me throw it away the next day. Her reply came 5 minutes later. "You're not alone, Maddie. Not if you don't want to be." That night, I received a message that undid me. It was from Brooke. She had created a new email address separate from our family's shared plan. The subject line read, "I'm sorry. I didn't know how bad it was." Her message was long, rambling in the way confessions often are. She said she'd begged our parents to wait, that she'd felt sick when they told her not to contact me, that she had overheard them talking in the hotel room, Mom saying, "Madison's always been dramatic. She'll be fine," and Dad replying, "She wants attention. We deserve this vacation." Brooke said she hadn't known what to believe, so she didn't choose. She froze, took selfies, laughed for Instagram, pretended the guilt didn't weigh her down. But she'd seen my name mentioned in a local article about a company's employee care program. Jordan must have submitted it quietly. That was when Brooke realized I had built something without them, and that maybe for the first time I had chosen not to need them. "I want to come home," she wrote, "but I don't know if I'm still welcome." I stared at her words, torn between fury and sorrow. I wanted to scream at her for complicity, for silence, for being the golden child who never asked questions. But I also remembered holding her hand the night she broke her arm, sleeping in her bed after our childhood dog died, hiding together in the linen closet during storms. She had been my sister long before she was their daughter. Still, her apology came with no guarantee of change, and I didn't owe her automatic forgiveness. The next morning, I asked Jordan to help me reach the drawer where Diane's letter lived. I reread it, slower this time. I thought about what it meant to rebuild a family not from loyalty, but from intention, from choice. And when the phone rang, my parents for the first time in weeks, I let it ring until it stopped. Have you ever had to choose between forgiveness and self-preservation? How do you decide who deserves a second chance after betrayal? Because the next day, Brooke showed up at my door with nothing but a backpack and a secret that would change everything. Brooke stood at my door, soaked from the Seattle drizzle, holding nothing but a worn backpack and the kind of expression you wear when you've run out of excuses. Her eyes were swollen, but she didn't cry. Not yet. Neither did I. I just opened the door wide enough to let her in, then turned and wheeled myself back to the couch. The silence between us wasn't cold. It was heavy, thick with all the years we hadn't said the things we needed to say. She sat across from me, knees pulled to her chest like she was still that little girl hiding from thunder in the linen closet. "I didn't come to ask you to forgive me," she began. "I came because I finally see them for who they are." Her voice trembled, but not from fear. "And I needed to tell you something before they spin the story first." My stomach tightened. I had spent weeks building my walls back up, brick by brick, only to feel them shift under her voice. She told me the truth. The trip to Paris wasn't just a vacation. It was a test. Our parents had planned it as a reset, a way to escape what they called the toxicity of adult children who made them feel guilty for living their lives. A therapist they'd been seeing had suggested it. A controversial self-help figure whose brand centered on cutting ties with emotional vampires, a term, Brooke said, our mother had used to describe me. They had read books about radical joy, joined Facebook groups that encouraged parental liberation. And the plan, she whispered this like it might still destroy her, was not to come back at all. They had been looking at properties in southern France. Our mother had interviewed for a wellness retreat job. Our dad had started liquidating assets without telling me. The extension from 1 week to 1 month had always been a lie. They had intended to leave me behind completely. She handed me a folded sheet of paper, an email she wasn't supposed to see, from Mom to a friend. "Madison will land on her feet, she always does, but we can't keep letting her emotional gravity drag us down." I didn't cry. Not right away, because I wasn't even sure where to place the pain anymore. I had spent my whole life proving I was strong so they wouldn't leave, and they had left anyway because I was strong. Brooke curled her hands into fists. I believed them when they said you didn't need us, and that made it easier to walk away. I'm sorry, Maddie. Her voice cracked on my name. But I'm not them. I don't want to be like them. I didn't know what to say, so I nodded toward the kitchen. There's tea, if you want to stay. She moved carefully, like she was afraid the spell would break if she moved too quickly. I heard the sound of a kettle filling, a cupboard opening, and in that mundane choreography, something shifted. Not forgiveness, but maybe the start of something better, understanding. Over the next few weeks, Brooke became a quiet fixture in the apartment. She didn't ask to stay, she just did. She helped me shower when Jessica was off duty, cooked eggs with too much pepper, but always remembered my meds. She stayed late after my physical therapy sessions and asked questions instead of offering pity. One night, she found Diane's letter and asked to read it. I let her. She didn't say much after, just folded it carefully and said, "We deserve to know her." I agreed. The first time I stood without help, Brooke was there. No camera, no applause, just her hands near my sides in case I stumbled. When I didn't, she let out the quietest laugh and whispered, "You're terrifyingly stubborn." I smiled, winded and sweating. But healing isn't linear. It's jagged, uneven. And one Sunday, as we sat on the couch with tea and reruns, my phone rang. It was Mom. I almost didn't answer, but Brooke looked at me and said, "Do it, not for them, for you." So I picked up. Her voice was smooth, curated like a podcast intro. "Madison, sweetheart, we're back in town. We thought we'd stop by." I didn't respond right away. I could hear clinking in the background, cutlery, music, laughter. "We'd love to see you," she continued, and for a moment I imagined the photo she'd post, a filtered image, a hashtag, a caption about family and resilience. I took a breath and said, "You can't drop back into my life because it's convenient. I'm not part of your highlight reel anymore." Silence, then a brittle laugh. "Well, I see Brooke's been in your ear." "No," I said, "she's been in the room. That's the difference." I hung up, and this time I didn't feel hollow. I felt anchored. 6 months after the crash, I walked into the office for the first time. Not wheeled, walked. Jordan was waiting at the elevator. She didn't say a word, just hugged me. Hard. The team had prepared a small celebration. Coffee, donuts, a banner someone clearly made last minute with Sharpie. But it was perfect. It wasn't about return. It was about recognition. That afternoon, I logged into the support group and shared my full story for the first time. Diane sent me a care package from Oregon, lavender oil and a framed photo of my grandfather. And Brooke? She moved into her own place 3 blocks from mine. She got a job at a local nonprofit. Every Friday we have dinner, not because we have to, because we want to. The scars on my legs are fading, but the ones they left inside, I don't want those to fade. They're reminders that survival isn't just about breathing. It's about choosing who gets to stand beside you, who earns the right. And as for family, I used to think it was built from blood. Now I know better. Family is the people who show up when it's raining, who stay when it's hard, who don't ask you to be less just so they can feel more. What did this story make you feel? Were there moments you saw yourself in Madison or in Brooke? If you loved this story, type 100 in the comments. Tell us what country you're watching from. We'd love to know how far these stories travel. And if this touched your heart, share it with someone who needs a reminder that strength sometimes begins with a single step. Thank you for watching Life Stories.